Hey there and welcome. Have you ever really stopped to think about how the food you eat actually powers, well, everything? I mean, from a single thought zipping through your brain to running a marathon, your body is constantly paying this massive energy bill. So today, we're going to follow the money. We're going to break down exactly how your cells take a simple sugar and turn it into the very power that keeps you going.
All right, let's just jump right in with a pretty simple question. Picture this. You take a bite of an apple. It's sweet, it's delicious, right? And it's packed with carbs. But how? How does that simple sugar, that glucose, make its way from your stomach all the way to a tiny neuron in your brain and give it the juice it needs to fire off a thought? It kind of feels like magic, doesn't it? But it's actually one of the most basic, fundamental processes in all of biology.
So the secret, the answer to all this, it really comes down to one single molecule. ATP. That stands for adenosine triphosphate. The easiest way to think about it is like cash. It's the universal currency for your cells. If a cell wants to do literally anything, I'm talking contract a muscle, send a nerve impulse, build a new protein, it has to spend ATP. So you can think of our whole metabolic system as this giant factory, and its one job is to crank out this one crucial energy-packed molecule. Okay, so how do we get the energy that's locked up inside that glucose molecule and transfer it over to ATP? Well, we've got to break it down. And I love this analogy. It's like taking a car and just stripping it down for all its most valuable parts. You're not just junking it, you're harvesting what's useful. In our story, the car is glucose, and the valuable parts we're after, those are its high-energy electrons. This whole stripping down process, it actually has a name. It's called glycolysis, and the name tells you everything you need to know. Glyco for sugar and lysis for splitting. It's literally sugar splitting. It's this beautiful 10-step sequence of reactions that takes one glucose molecule and just snaps it in half. And what's absolutely wild is that this exact same process happens in the main fluid of pretty much every single cell on the planet, from the tiniest bacteria all the way up to us. It is the universal starting point for making energy. All right, so glycolysis isn't just one big chaotic event. It happens in two main phases. The first one is all about getting ready, and they call it the investment phase, which is perfect because, just like in business or anything else, sometimes you got to spend a little money to make money. You have to put in some energy up front to get a big payoff later on. So the first problem the cell has to solve is actually pretty simple. Glucose comes into the cell through this special little door, a transporter protein. But what's to stop it from just turning around and floating right back out? I mean, this stuff is valuable fuel. The cell has to find a way to lock it in. So what's its brilliant solution? It immediately spends one of its precious ATP molecules to just slap a phosphate group onto the glucose. It's like putting a tag on it, and this tag does two crucial things. First, it gives the glucose a negative charge, so it can't get back out the door. It's trapped. Then the cell spends a second ATP. This adds another phosphate, and this is the key step. It makes the whole sugar molecule super unstable, kind of like bending a stick until it's just about to snap. At this point, there's no turning back. The commitment has been made. Okay, let's do a quick accounting check. At the end of this investment phase, where do we stand? Well, we've spent 2 ATP. Our balance sheet is -2. Now, that might sound like a bad deal, but trust me, it was a totally necessary cost to get everything primed and ready for the main event. And here we are. This is the turning point of the entire process. All that prep work, all that energy we just spent, it was all leading up to this one single dramatic moment, the split. So that unstable 6-carbon sugar, now with those 2 phosphates making it ready to pop, it just breaks, snap, cleanly in half. It becomes 2 separate 3-carbon molecules. This is the lysis part of glycolysis we talked about. And here's the beautiful part. Because we now have 2 identical molecules, everything that happens from this point on, it happens twice. We've just doubled our potential for an energy payoff. Okay, now for the fun part. This is the payoff phase. The cell put its money down, it split the raw material, and now it is time to cash in and start harvesting some real energy. So what happens is, in this series of really clever steps, those 2 3-carbon molecules get oxidized. That's just a fancy way of saying their high-energy electrons get stripped away. And these electrons don't just float off. They get picked up by a special carrier molecule called NAD+, which becomes NADH. The best way to think of NADH is like a little rechargeable battery or an energy shuttle. It's going to carry that energy off to another part of the cell to make a ton more ATP later. But wait, there's more.
the cell also makes ATP right here, right now. Those phosphate groups that we stuck on earlier, they get plucked off and handed over to create 4 brand new molecules of ATP.
So let's look at the gross income from this payoff phase. It's a solid 4 ATP molecules. That's the direct return we got on that initial 2 ATP investment. All right, we've seen the investment, we've seen the payoff. It's time to do the final math. Let's figure out what the actual net profit is from breaking down just 1 molecule of glucose. And you know what? The accounting is super simple. We spent 2 ATP to get things started, we made 4 ATP in the payoff, so 4 minus 2, that gives us a net profit of 2 ATP. That's the bottom line. For every single glucose that goes in, the cell walks away with 2 ready-to-use ATP molecules. But hold on, the profit isn't just about the ATP we can spend right now. The total haul from glycolysis is actually a 3-part package. First, you've got your 2 net ATP for immediate energy needs. Second, you get those 2 NADH molecules. Remember, those are like little energy vouchers you can cash in later for a way bigger payout. And finally, we're left with the 2 molecules of what's left over from the glucose, a substance called pyruvate. This pyruvate, this is what remains of our original glucose after we've stripped it for those initial parts. It's the final product of glycolysis. But here's the thing, it's still packed with a ton of energy. And what happens to it next is a really crucial decision for the cell. So there you have it. We've successfully split a sugar molecule and made a small but absolutely vital profit. But don't think for a second the story is over. This was just Act 1. That pyruvate molecule, it's now standing at a crossroads, and depending on one simple thing, whether or not oxygen is around, it's about to start a whole new journey to unleash a massive amount of leftover energy. So where does it go from here? Well, that's a story for another time.